video editor out there, hooked up and chilling in the control room awaiting your scenario for the miggity Mac Daddy.
So while Sonic 2 was being developed in the United States, Sonic Team back in Japan was working on another project for Sega's up-and-coming add-on to the Mega Drive called the SEGA CD. For those of you not in the know, the SEGA CD was a disc-based add-on for the Mega Drive which allowed for many advantages over your typical Mega Drive cartridge, such as the use of CD quality music, full-motion video cutscenes, among many other aspects. Just like how Sonic the Hedgehog was key in launching the Mega Drive to stardom, Sega had also began working on Sonic CD as the flagship title for the SEGA CD. The project was headed by Sonic Team's Naoto Oshima, without the aid of Yuji Naka and a small segment of Sonic Team staff, as they had already grown dissatisfied with Sega of Japan's corporate policies, and subsequently had left to the US to work on Sonic the Hedgehog 2 with the Sega Technical Institute. With the two teams divided, Sonic Team in Japan was busy with Sonic CD, all the while Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was released a year prior in 1992 to massive success. And so, following that success, on September 23rd, 1993, Sonic CD was released to critical acclaim. But given that we're talking about the SEGA CD here, that really isn't saying much. Out of all the classic Sonic games in the classic series, Sonic CD is one that's still up in the air for most fans. It bears all the hallmarks of the four pure Mega Drive Sonic games, but at the same time, Sonic CD isn't a game that many classic fans can say that they grew up with, unlike Sonic 2 or Sonic & Knuckles. As a result of this, classic fans have been at somewhat of a divide with each other, some going as far to say that this game is the pinnacle of Sonic gameplay and that no other game can surpass it, or that some just claim that it's just not as good as Sonic 2. Well, considering that I tore apart Sonic 1, praised the majority of Sonic 2, it's time to see if Sonic CD is merely a product of its time, or is really just an undiscovered gem that was overshadowed by the nostalgia of fans who never grew up with the game. Just like last time, I will be translating the plot from the Japanese manual of Sonic CD, so once again, dramatization will occur. A small and beautiful star, Little Planet. This star appears over a huge lake called Never Lake, for only 1 month of the entire year. The star, which was also called Miracle Planet, was a place where the wonderful time stones that commanded time lay dormant. An event in which the time stones caused a miracle to occur was when it would transform the polluted water surrounding the desert around it into a beautiful lake. The evil scientist Dr. Eggman had kept a close watch on it. The star Little Planet where the time stones sleep is suitable for my fortress. Little Planet was soon chained over Never Lake, and he began building a huge fortress. After finding all the time stones, time flowed freely, and he set forth to attain his world conquest. Although Sonic, who knew nothing of his plan, was on his way to Never Lake to watch the planet. What? Sonic? Coming here? How convenient. Sonic ran up as he saw Little Planet attached by a chain to a rock, and he became very upset. He looked at that rock and saw Dr. Eggman's face, inevitably in the slope. That's Eggman! This time I will destroy what stops my plans, and with the time stones, I can conquer the world! Ho ho ho! Merry Christmas? A blue sparkle of light waited, hidden among the shadows behind Dr. Eggman as he laughed loudly. Although it was Sonic who destroyed Dr. Eggman's ambitions easily, can the Little Planet be freed? Okay! As long as I have courage, I can do anything! So, kinda like Sonic 1, the plot can easily be summed up as Sonic fights bad guys. However, like Sonic 2, there is still an element of mysticism about Little Planet and the Time Stones, which to me, does add a little bit something more to a bare-bones story. As Sonic fights his way through Eggman's forces, he comes across a newcomer to the Sonic series, Amy Rose. Or as her classic look comes off as Pink Sonic and Drag. According to her profile, in this game she's energetic, likes fortunes and mystic things, who was compelled to travel to Little Planet by the tarot cards which claimed that she would have an important meeting with Sonic there. Sonic Team? Why the hell have you never included any of this stuff in the more recent games? Seriously man, why am I finding more interesting stuff about the Sonic lore and characters from games that were made at a time when we weren't really supposed to care about this kind of stuff, instead of today where we should be caring about this kind of lore and character development? I mean, there is so much that you could do with Amy's background and the supernatural elements that pertain to that. I mean, hell, it could also explain the sudden psychic powers of Silver the Hedge. Which is why I honestly feel that Harry Mason was the best Ghost Rider, and that Resident Evil Code Veronica was by far the best Spider-Man movie in the history of the Earth. Anyway, Amy, true to her nature, was designed to be something of the anti-Princess Peach, in the sense that instead of the hero chasing the damsel in distress, it's instead the damsel in distress chasing the hero. But of course, our love-struck hedgehog clearly doesn't get the message that Sonic cares only about a life of adventure rather than a traditional love life, and as such, she's taken hostage by Sonic's first and by far creepiest rival, Metal Sonic, a robot duplicate created by Dr. Eggman who's said to match Sonic's abilities and go above and beyond them. And yet, even despite Metal Sonic's status, he's oftentimes considered to be one of the more underrated characters compared to the rivals that came later. As Sonic continues blasting his way through Eggman's robots, he eventually catches up with Metal Sonic, and the two enter into a race with Dr. Eggman following closely behind them with an instant death laser, which to many is usually the first thing people think of when talking about Sonic CD. With Sonic being the obvious victor, he rescues Amy and defeats Dr. Eggman, and thus, the day is saved. Or maybe Sonic never saved the day at all. As it turns out, Dr. Eggman had a backup plan in his possession of the Time Stones, where he travels back in time and undoes all of Sonic's attempts to stop him. Whoa, 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 whoa! So while Sonic 2 was being developed in the United States, Sonic Team back in Japan was working on another project for Sega's up-and-coming add-on to the Mega Drive called the SEGA CD. Anyway, after collecting the Time Stones and defeating Dr. Eggman, again, Sonic frees Little Planet from Eggman's influence, and thus Sonic heads off on a new adventure. However, this adventure may have some unforeseen consequences for the Blue Blur in the days to come. Overall, the story in Sonic CD, going by the manual, and again this is really weird for me to say, it kind of pales by comparison to Sonic the Hedgehog 2's story in the sense of intrigue and danger. Now, granted, a lot of people would say that the story in a Sonic game means nothing, but it wasn't until I searched up the Japanese plot prologues that I actually saw a lot more depth than I thought there was. However briefly it might be covered by a lot of other people, I'd at least give these games credit for at least having a bit more of a story to them. And though Sonic CD does feel kind of basic by comparison to Sonic the Hedgehog 2, it is still a fairly serviceable video game plot for the early 90s. In terms of introducing anything, the game does bring us Amy Rose and Metal Sonic, but as far as anything else of interest, the only thing the manual really gives us is the mysticism of the Time Stones, which are never seen again, and Amy's background and mysticism in tarot cards, which is really a big missed opportunity for games of the modern era. Ultimately, when looking back at Sonic CD's plot, when taking the overall Sonic canon as we know it today into consideration, it is pretty interesting how the manual does detail a few things, and it does have some serious potential for expansion, but unfortunately, Sonic Team just does nothing with it. But I think I've gone on about the story for long enough, so let's get into some gameplay. Sonic's moveset is just like it was before. He has a standard jump, rolling ball form, spin dash, as featured in previous games. But alongside that, he has another new addition to his arsenal, the Super Peel Out. By holding up and pressing the same button that you'd use to charge up the spin dash, Sonic's legs will turn into a figure 8, and as such, Sonic will launch into a high-speed dash. The only downside to this, however, is that unlike the spin dash, the Super Peel Out leaves Sonic vulnerable to being attacked, whereas the spin dash will usually have Sonic ducking under enemy fire, and more often than not, the spin dash will usually take the enemies out. But for reasons beyond my comprehension, I hear from so many classic Sonic fans that the Super Peel Out is one of the coolest moves in the series, man, and it should totally make a return in a future game. But here's my question. Why have a move that's intended to give you a burst of speed, when there's already a move that does that, and goes above and beyond in terms of being an offensive technique? I know part of the reason why this is, and I'll cover that shortly, but for the time being, I really have to ask, why do fans love this move so much? From what I can tell, it's purely a case that it just looks cool. And aside from the usage of the Super Peel Out, it's pretty much pointless since the spin dash can already do what the Super Peel Out does, and much more. But the spinny thingies! The spinny thingies! But that's probably just me being a bit facetious, and however, aside from that being the most pointless addition to Sonic's arsenal outside of the Insta-Shield, there is only one practical purpose it could possibly serve. One of the major gameplay elements of Sonic CD is the usage of time travel to protect the future from Dr. Eggman, which in order to do so, it requires Sonic to hit either a or sign, and as such, Sonic has two methods of protecting the future. One method is by travelling to the past, where Sonic can locate a robot generator and smash it to create a good future where Eggman's robots had never existed, and as such, Little Planet can integrate technology and nature in a perfect balance. On the other hand, should Sonic travel to the bad future where Dr. Eggman has completely taken over, Sonic must rely on the Time Stones, in which he has to collect 50 rings and jump into a giant ring at the end of the stage, where he must complete a special stage in order to collect the Time Stones, in order to completely undo what Dr. Eggman has done. On the subject of time travel, in order to transition from the past, present, and then going back to the future, you have to build up enough speed, then maintain that speed, as indicated by the glowing lights around Sonic, and only then can you time travel. The only problem with this is, unless of course you have springs set up or enough room to allow for the time span between warping between time periods, what's going to happen more often than not is that you'll build up the speed, but then you'll abruptly stop and lose the ability to travel through time, whether to the past or the future, unless of course you hit another sign. And even though I will say that Sonic CD's level design is light years beyond the slow, blocky level design of Sonic 1, unfortunately, it doesn't leave much in the way of Sonic CD's time travel element. On the other hand, outside of the method which it takes to time travel through levels, the levels themselves are actually pretty decent to run through. Well, aside from Wacky Workbench's bouncy design, but it's more or less on the level of Sonic 2 for me. As far as bosses are concerned, Sonic CD does feature some pretty interesting boss concepts. I mean, oftentimes you'll be put in a bunch of different scenarios, like fighting Dr. Eggman on a treadmill, beneath the water where you're quite literally fighting for oxygen, leaping up between floors in order to smack him down, and of course the infamous Metal Sonic race. In terms of special stages, the ones featured in Sonic CD are a godsend compared to the rubbish half-pipe design of Sonic 2. They involve having Sonic destroy UFOs within a minute and a half pseudo 3D environment where your one obstacle is water. Either a clever reference to Sonic's aquaphobia, or something that's completely lost in context. In any case, the special stages here are a lot easier to adjust to, and as such, you should have a pretty comfortable time hunting the Time Stones, rather than the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic 2. Although, some are a little bit more trippy than others and make me feel as if I've been smoking Alice Cooper's toenail clippings. Overall, the gameplay aspect of Sonic CD is one that I definitely hold above the original Sonic the Hedgehog and hold relatively on the same ground as Sonic 2's. But my problem is with a few bumps in the road that may determine whether or not you're going to like this game or not. I'll probably end up reiterating myself at the end of the review, but I get the impression that results may vary depending upon your enjoyment of the time travel elements in this game, compared to Sonic the Hedgehog 2's more streamlined setup. Over to the technical aspects, Sonic CD definitely benefits from getting the SEGA CD treatment. The most obvious thing would be the inclusion of FMV anime cutscenes done by Toei Animation, which, while looking quite pixelated on the SEGA CD, are given a new level of shine on the Sonic Jam and Mega Collection ports. Though the cutscenes don't have any dialogue, and the ending is more or less just a collection of clips based upon the levels in the game, with either Cosmic Alternity or Sonic Boom playing over them, it does make me pine for another Sonic anime in the same vein as Sonic X or the 1996 OVA. I can only dream. Another thing to note is the increase of animation with Sonic in this game, as there are many sprites of him moving up in the air when he hits a spring, and a few nice touches here and there which really do go above and beyond in showing off the SEGA CD's hardware. The soundtrack of Sonic CD is also one of interest, as the US and Japanese/European versions of the game have two completely different soundtracks depending upon where you are. The Japanese and European soundtracks have more of an early 90s electronic dance vibe to it, which is quite clear given Eggman's boss music. World's fastest DJ indeed. But the American soundtrack on the other hand... I mean, dude, talk about tonal dissonance, man. I mean, classic Sonic fans have always told me that this series was supposed to be light-hearted and friendly and fun, with nothing threatening or serious whatsoever. I mean, seriously, man, what's next? Sonic killing himself?
I'm out of here!
Jesus Christ, Sega, why not throw in some deathly screams while you're at it? Okay, creepy music aside, the US soundtrack of Sonic CD contains a mixture of ambient and guitar-driven tracks, with my personal favourite of which being Stardust Speedway, Bad Future track, and, now that I think about it, just generally the Bad Future tracks in the game. Now when comparing both soundtracks, I like both, but I generally do find a few of the American tracks taking my preference over the Japanese tracks. The reason why is mostly because I feel these tracks tend to emphasize the gravity of the situation a little bit better, which puts me more in the mood to stop Eggman from conquering Little Planet. Not to say that the Japanese soundtrack is bad, I honestly do enjoy it quite a bit, but it's more apples and oranges in this case. As for the reason why there's two soundtracks to this game, it was because Sega of America at the time believed that the tracks had too closely resembled some electronic dance music that was coming out at the time, and thus employed Spencer Nielsen and David Young to compose the music for the US version, while the original Japanese soundtrack was done by Naofumi Hataya and Hiko Utoku, the woman who also voiced Sonic's two lines in this game. Before we close off, one thing I will bring up is the 2011 re-release, which is probably how most classic Sonic fans who never bought a SEGA CD in the early 90s got to experience Sonic CD for the first time. In 2011, a dude by the name of Christian Whitehead showcased a proof of concept demo of Sonic CD being played on an iPod Touch to Sega, which eventually led to him creating a full-fledged remake of Sonic CD from the ground up using his retro engine. Now again, I'm no programmer by any means, but this dude has my kudos for having done all of that work, which could have just as easily been a shoddy porting job of the game nearly 20 years old by that point. But one other thing to note about the 2011 re-release is the inclusion of a bunch of new special features, such as the inclusion of Tails, 60 frames per second gameplay, and the choice of both American and Japanese soundtracks to choose from. And given the availability of this version and all its new features, it's probably in your best interest to pick up this version of the game. So with all that out of the way, what are my final thoughts on Sonic CD? I won't say that Sonic CD is my favourite Sonic game of all time, but it is one that I do enjoy a lot, even if I don't play it very much. For what few bumps in the road that it has, I can look past them and have an overall fun experience compared to some of Sonic 2's flaws in Metropolis Zone and Oil Ocean Zone. Is this the best Sonic game ever made? No, but the amount of shine and effort put into it by Sonic Team, and especially the effort put into it by Christian Whitehead for the 2011 remake, it at the very least shows a well-polished game and one of the few good ones for the doomed SEGA CD. In terms of recommendations, if you're interested in classic Sonic gameplay mixed in with a few new elements, then I'd say you should give Sonic CD a shot. However, if you're the kind of person who prefers a straight-up A to B experience with Sonic games, then I think you'll probably feel that Sonic CD screws around too much with time travel and probably leaving the game a little bit cluttered as a result. So on that note, I am Skully, keep it new metal, and next time we conclude the Summer of Sonic Marathon 2017 with the third game in the classic series, and the one that concludes the Death Egg story arc with Sonic and Knuckles. Catch you on the flip side, dudes.